The anterior pituitary gland, or the APG, is also known as the adenophysis. I kind of like that name because adeno refers to its hormone producing function. And unlike the posterior pituitary, which is called the neurophysis due to its neuron filled structures, the anterior pituitary makes its own hormones. Both pituitary glands hang inferior to the hypothalamus, and they're both connected by this thin little stalk right here that's called the infundibulum. And I'm going to label it as A, and then I'm going to circle it and say A, infundibulum. Contained within the infundibulum are the hypophyseal portal vessels, sometimes called the hypophyseal portal venules. Blood comes in to this superior hypophyseal artery right here. Right? So blood comes in here and then it circulates in the hypothalamus and then is transported directly down into the APG. And this is why this is called a portal system, because a portal system is not about systemic circulation. A portal system is about the connection between two discrete organs. So here, these vessels only contain substances that are exchanged from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary gland. Now, when the anterior pituitary gland senses these hormones from the hypothalamus, it then releases its own hormones into systemic circulation by way of these hypophyseal veins, which are sometimes called venules as well. The posterior and anterior pituitary glands differ in histology. The posterior pituitary gland appears much less stained to its neuronal component, the neurons that it contains, and the myelin, while the anterior pituitary gland soaks up a lot of stain. In the anterior pituitary, there are three main cell types that can be identified. Acidophils, which basically have like a pinkish color to them. And in fact, the word acidophil is used in many different organs to indicate pink stained cells. Basophils have a little bit more of a purple stained cytoplasm. And again, same thing. The word basophil is used in many different organs to indicate purple stained cells. There's also a third type of cell in the anterior pituitary gland that a lot of books don't speak about, which are called chromophobes. And they actually lack any kind of stain. And they can be very difficult to spot in histology. So the chromophobes, like I said, they lack stain. And just as a note, in the posterior pituitary gland, the name of the cells there are pituocytes. This diagram is a great summary, right? It's a great overview of the anterior pituitary gland hormones that you should be familiar with. At first, this slide looks like alphabet soup. I know. But these abbreviations, they'll help you. And they're widely accepted. All right, so let's go through each one, right? Like first we have prolactin, which of course we're going to speak about a whole lot more in the reproductive chapters. And its abbreviation is PRL, and it targets mammary glands, which are listed here. The next hormone is the growth hormone, which I have listed here, which is abbreviated GH. And you can see it affects a lot of somatic tissues like fat, bone, and muscle. So those are its target tissues. There's also the adrenocorticotropic hormone. And what it does is it targets the adrenal cortex to make its own hormones. There's a few of them, and that's discussed in another mini lecture. There's also the thyroid stimulating hormone, which you should not confuse with the thyroid, sorry about that gap there, which you should not confuse with the thyroid releasing hormone. And this also targets cells in the thyroid gland and is discussed in another mini lecture. Finally, the last two that are listed here are the follicle stimulating hormone, and then we have the luteinizing hormone. And these are, again, discussed in a lot more detail in the reproductive chapters. So you should be familiar with all of these hormones. The most important to be very familiar with in this chapter are GH, ACTH, and TSH. I would say for the other three hormones, be able to answer general questions like who secretes them and what are their target organs. It is important to remember that the APG does not decide to release or stop making its own hormones. It doesn't make those decisions. The hypothalamus makes those decisions for the anterior pituitary gland. And it does that by releasing, or I'm sorry, let me use a better word. It does that by secreting, releasing, or inhibiting hormones into the hypophyseal portal system. For example, and I am not making this up, but for example, there is a growth hormone releasing hormone that is secreted into the hypophyseal portal system when the hypothalamus senses that the level is low. In other instances, the anterior pituitary gland is controlled by levels of hormones that it doesn't make. And what I mean about that is, for example, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is also secreted into the hypophyseal portal system, it stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to make the thyroid releasing hormone. Wait, we're not done. The thyroid releasing hormone then goes to the thyroid and makes it release the thyroid hormone. It's the level of this hormone that is feeding back to both the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary gland. So they're not responding to the levels of the hormones that they make. They're responding to like an end organ or an end cascade hormone, the end product. So the APG, it can monitor the level of thyroid hormone and stop making it when the thyroid hormone is too high, right? So in the thyroid hormone feedback, there is no inhibiting hormone. ACTH can also be released under the control of something called the cortisol releasing hormone. The hypothalamus secretes it into the hypophyseal portal system. Again, there is no corresponding cortisol inhibiting hormone. The APG is able to detect the levels of cortisol, and it uses those levels to shut down ACTH production. And so this is how we can see how the hypothalamus controls the anterior pituitary gland, and so does other organs. Basically, the anterior pituitary gland has like the smallest amount of control over what it secretes and what it doesn't secrete. Many students like this slide, but usually not until after you've dipped into all parts of the chapter. These are trophic cascades, or sequences of hormone release for anterior pituitary gland hormones. So each one of the anterior pituitary gland hormones has a corresponding releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. And we can see that here in the very first column on the left-hand side. The second column shows you all of the hormones that are released from only the anterior pituitary gland. And then these last two columns, they list the effector or the target cell. Same thing, I could say effector or target cell. And they also list the effect. I want to remind you here that a hormone does not do anything but send a message to another organ or tissue. And so a hormone is never an effector. An organ that secretes the hormone might be an effector, but the hormone is never an effector. It's just a way for two organs to communicate. So you should never stop the story at, and the thyroid stimulating hormone is released. What you have to say is what that does, the target it reaches, and what the effect of that target is. So you should never say, and the growth hormone is released. You should always say, and it targets liver, bone, and muscles in your body to produce, among other things, IGF, insulin growth factor production. So remember, it's not just about the secretion of a hormone. It's also about where it goes, the target it has, and the effect that it produces.